Episode number 66 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. My guest today is Jasmine Rose. Jasmine is a holistic fertility specialist and birth doula based out of Vancouver, Canada. Her mission is to rewrite the way we connect to our fertility, menstrual cycles, and sexuality. With her background in holistic nutrition, combined with years of self-studies and personal experience, she has created a business that focuses on holistically nourishing women to create harmony within their bodies. Jasmine's work is deeply rooted in the feminine and invites you to look at your inner circles in a whole new way. So welcome to the podcast, Jasmine.
Thank you for having me.
So can you share how you've embarked on your journey of health and wellness and wholeness?
Yeah, wow, what a question. I love that we're diving right in, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I always say, it's so interesting when you kind of come to one point in your journey and you can look back and see all of the intricate parts that were kind of playing out without you even realizing they were like parts of the journey that got you here. So I always like to see these questions and just reflect a little bit. But I would say the biggest thing for me was I went through an experience probably about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, where my husband and I were heading into our fertility journey, and we were really excited to start cultivating family. And around that time, I started experiencing some abnormal bleeding. And there wasn't really any indication as to why it was happening in my body. And at that time, I had already been trained as a holistic nutritionist. And so I had a pretty good spectrum as to how the body works and runs. And it kind of caught me by surprise. And, going through this journey, it was like 6 weeks of bleeding, and then it was 3 months of bleeding. And then all of a sudden we were at the 6-month point, and I realized that there wasn't really going to be an answer. Like, there was no diagnosis and there was no treatment for me. And I was really kind of being called into discovering a different relationship with my body and how I was going to really heal and transform on my own with the tools that I had in front of me and the community around me. And that was a pretty dark experience, but I feel like we always do have these kind of rock bottom type experiences that really help us rise. And now I can look back and say, wow, I really needed to go through something like that so that I could cultivate such a deep relationship. But it has definitely propelled me into wanting to do this work with other women before it gets to that point,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can start discovering their journey in a place not so much in crisis.
Yeah, for sure. I've also been through not quite the same exact thing, but having irregular periods and then not having any solution is so frustrating because you don't know what's going on and you feel helpless because you don't know what to do. So how did you figure out what to do? I know you already knew about nutrition. How did you figure out how to resolve this, and what do you think it was?
Yeah, so, I'm definitely someone where when I put my mind to something, I tend to just try everything and keep what works and disregard the rest. But I do feel like I had put this pressure on the medical system to be able to give me the answer, just to give me some sort of lead, and doctors aren't gods. They can't figure out everything. They're there when we need them, and there are some things that are unexplained. And so I am really thankful for that now, because really the only thing that was offered to me was birth control. And because of the state that I was in and really wanting to build my fertility up to conceive, that wasn't feeling like the right option for me. And quite truthfully, as soon as I started telling people in my community about what I was going through, I felt like there were so many women that were going through, much of what you said, not the same experience, but to some degree just feeling a little bit lost, and that there's so much information out there, but how do we really condense it and make it our own so that we can heal? And so I started trying everything. I joined sisterhood circles. I started floating. I started doing different kinds of dance. I slowed down my workouts. I was going for tons of acupuncture and massage and doing anything that I could to really soothe my nervous system. And I don't have anything specific as to what really was the catalyst for me to find healing in that. But I do feel like it was a really well-rounded experience of really deeply connecting with myself, finding some spirituality practices that have been really helpful for me, and then really pinpointing the both natural and medicinal modalities that were so supportive to my healing that actually felt really good and that I could afford as well. Because I feel like that's something that we don't talk a lot about in the wellness world. So many people don't have access to thousands and thousands of dollars to be doing all of these alternative medicine appointments, but there are so many free practices that you can do to truly connect to your body. And I love using food personally because we're already eating. So if we can swap things out that are going to be more nourishing for us, then we aren't really dipping into our financial pockets and, perpetuating stress that
Yeah.
is inherently deepening our conditions.
Right. And it's so funny because you mentioned you don't know exactly what it is. I'm the same way. Like I'll do a million things at once. I'll kind of like knock it at every angle. And then I'm like, I'm not sure what it was, but I did everything to try to like figure this out.
Yeah, and there
Um,
was an element for me that I really felt was, a lot of hidden trauma hiding in my body that had cultivated, dis-ease in my physical body. And
mhm.
so, like I said, I don't have any, one answer, but I will say that the experience really gave me an invitation to look at some stuff that I might have otherwise just swept under the rug. So although it
Mhm.
might not have been the overall catalyst that helped me find healing in my body, I came out of it feeling also more emotionally well.
Right.
And so many of the time, those physical experiences do propel us into different areas of ourselves, whether it's, the reason why or not. And so I do feel like it gave me a sense of feeling more rounded in myself.
Yeah, I hear this story so many times that people get a wake up call and things happen for a reason, and it's like something to wake us up and to get us to pay attention. So it's interesting that you mentioned. I mean, I think emotions are so important. And how did you figure out that it was that, and what did you do to heal through those blocks?
It's so interesting because I feel like so many of my healing discoveries came to me
Hmm.
and they came in so many different forms. And I mentioned earlier I had joined like a sisterhood community because I was really needing to surround myself with other women because I felt like um, I could speak so boldly about something that isn't talked about a lot if I was safely surrounded by this really beautiful circle of women. And in that circle, I started discovering some shadow work techniques,
Hmm.
ways to kind of go into the parts of ourselves that we don't really love looking at. And through that, I started to feel this like emotional backpack, like I was just taking bricks out of the backpack. And I started to really think of my relationship with my womb and my
Mm,
relationship with
I
my
love that.
cycle, right? And just being like, well, if I'm feeling lighter here and the heaviness is here, how can I combine the two?
Hmm.
And I really started to unpack some deep, deep shame that I didn't even know was lurking inside of my body. And a lot of it had to do with my sexuality,
Hmm.
some old traumas from when I was young, and just really being disconnected from my menstrual cycle. And what a gift to, very painfully, but go on this journey while trying to conceive, because I was inherently having to discover my fertility. I was having to
Hmm.
discover the essence of my cycle and how my body actually works before I even really deep dove into wanting to conceive. And so, um, the emotional work was something that was really soothing for me, and then I put it together with the body and I was like, here we go, like this is where the big stuff is.
Yeah, and it's so important that we're talking about this right now. And I thank you for bringing it up because I think that so many women go through that when you talk about the shame and really getting into what's really happening, because a lot of times we have these emotions and we suppress it, and it comes out in physical forms and we don't realize what it is, but our body shows us what's really happening beneath the surface, and it's a call to listen. So I think it takes a lot of courage, dive deep like you said, and look at what your body, your soul is telling you. And it takes a lot of courage, but at the same time, it's easier to do that in the long run than to continue living without embarking on the journey and like really realizing and connecting with your inner self. But I love that. It's just like, it's almost, I'm thinking connecting with the sacred feminine.
Mm-hmm. Feel like, there's so many pathways that we could go down with this conversation, but I feel like one of the key elements to being able to like unpack that grief or that shame, like that baggage that we're carrying within, is to actually talk about it with other women. Because
Yeah.
that I have women in my life who are my dearest friends and I can share anything with them. And when I started unpacking this, there was still this element of, being a scared little girl inside, worrying that me talking about my body in this way was going to be dirty or I was going to be shamed for it. And I'm somebody that works in birth and miscarriage and all of these other really taboo places. But when push comes to shove, and you're describing, something chronic that's going on in your body, and there's no diagnosis. So there's not
Mm-hmm.
really like this element where people can find a compassion point because they don't really understand what's going on. It can feel really lonely.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to make sure that the little bit of loneliness that I was feeling as a very like extroverted and honest person wasn't going to be everyone else's story. I wanted to be able to make sure that all of my friends and the women in my life knew, if you're going through something like this, I'm the person that you can call, even
Yeah.
if it makes me uncomfortable to be the first person to voice it.
Yeah. And I think that once one person voices it, another person, then you realize you're really not alone.
Ooh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's really the big thing, is like that, once you get through that, you realize that. Now, what I find so interesting is that you have a lot of different backgrounds, but they come together so beautifully. So you're a doula
Mm-hmm.
and you're a nutritionist. You put it all together in like a really unique way that I don't usually see often.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I was also a hairstylist, a really high-end hairstylist for
Hmm.
a decade before
You
this.
have great hair, by the way.
I was always like, wow, how did I go from hairstylist to this? And then it kind of clicked a couple years ago. And much to what I was speaking up about at the beginning, like we don't realize how much of our journeys are preparing us for where we
Mhm.
are. And
Right.
being a stylist for 10 years and being the person that people talk to and finding, that one little ping of interest and being able to like draw on that.
Hmm.
I feel like I was in practice of learning how to really have intentional conversation for most of my life. And then I just put it into practice in a different way.
Right. I
It's
totally understand what you're saying. I have a background in architecture,
right.
and you learn things in a different, it's just a different way. And then a lot of the things that I learned then are not, are things that I'm using now. It's not something that like, was kind of back then and I left, So everything has its purpose, even though you won't do that forever. You're still taking something with it, with you.
Mm-hmm, 100%.
So you seem obviously passionate about nutrition, and what is the biggest message you'd like to share about eating right, and how just at the center of everything it is?
Yeah, I mean, thank you. That's such a good question. You know, I always say I feel like I went to nutrition school to learn everything and then forget it right away. Because there's so much information and we are all so unique and individual, and there isn't really a right way. There's
Hmm.
not a right way, there's not a wrong way, there's just the way. And there's so
Right.
many
I love that.
there's
Because
so
yeah.
many barriers in that, right?
Mhm.
Everything from socioeconomic status and what we can afford to eat and nourish our bodies to organic to not, right? There's so many different ways. And so my best advice that I give to every single person is chew your food.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Right? Like
Yeah.
slow down, like
Mhm.
whatever you're eating, slow down and chew your food. Like digestion begins in the mouth.
That's right.
We become satiated. We start to make like a brain to gut connection.
Mhm.
And you'd be really surprised, like a food that you might only chew a couple times and swallow, when you take the time to chew it, you realize maybe how salty it is or how sweet it is.
Right.
Or you realize, oh, like this actually isn't really what I want right now, or I'm full already, or whatever it is. So, and in a world where we have so much information and so many options, I always just say slow down, chew your food,
Mhm.
practice mindfulness,
Yeah.
and start creating a relationship with what you're fueling your body with, and
Mhm.
thank yourself for always doing the best that you can.
I love that. That's such a great thing to take in. It's a great practice and it's so important. I saw something, I don't remember what it was. It was like 2020 or something, where it was an Iranian couple. It was an interesting thing. And the guy lived like he had like the best digestion and they ate really well and they do eat really well. They have a lot of spices and um the guy said to his grandchildren, chew your food. Your stomach does not have teeth. And I
Oh
just
my
remember, I was like, oh my God, I love that. That's awesome. And it's so true because then you get all the enzymes to mix in with from your saliva. Like it's so important to chew. And I love that you mentioned that because that's
God.
something we talk about what to eat, but we don't talk about how to eat.
Mhm.
you know?
And I feel like, for me personally, I also come across a lot of people with disordered eating backgrounds, myself included. And so I have a lot of compassion for kind of the masculine way of approaching food. Like, there's so many like structures and protocols. And while that can be really helpful for specific conditions, and I'm definitely not saying that nutrition isn't a very valuable resource because it is, when we feel like guilt around food or we feel like we're eating something bad, I mean, cortisol is also such
Mm,
a huge component of so many
yeah.
conditions in the body, like stress. You can look it up, it's in every single condition from
Yeah.
cancer to bronchitis to everything. Like, it's a huge culprit. So if we can just find a little bit more compassion with food freedom instead of making these very like rigid ways of eating, I do believe like soulful nourishment is actually going to help regenerate the nervous system and be able to actually create relationships with food so that it can be medicine. Because even if you're eating the best diet and you're stressed all the time, your digestive system is so depleted of stomach acid that it's not in a beneficial state anyways.
I love that you
So
say
create
that.
a really, yeah,
Such a
create a
great
relationship.
point. It's almost like it's like sacred eating.
Yes.
It's like really putting that presence with the food that's nourishing your body.
I love it.
So what does it mean to you to be whole? What does that mean?
I'm going to sit with that for 1 second. Um, Wholeness for me is a feeling. So when I talk about feeling whole in my world, um, and this goes back to a lot of the shadow work that I had the privilege to go into, it's really not compartmentalizing yourself, right? It's not this part of me is good and so I show it, and this part of me is bad and I don't want to show anyone that, and I don't like that I do this, but I'm gonna do this. We can be really, really judgmental on ourselves. And if we can find a way to feel like a lot of love and compassion for the parts of ourselves that we even don't like, the parts of ourselves that we tuck away or we don't show anyone, it's that feeling of being really, really rooted in, okay, I as I'm showing up with you right now, I'm all parts of me. and I deserve that love and that compassion and that acceptance. And so to really sink into wholeness, I feel like we need to start becoming really rooted in compassion for the parts of ourselves that we tuck away, so that we can bring ourselves together in our
Mm-hmm.
wholeness, and let people meet us where we're at.
That makes me
Yeah.
think of like soul retrieval with shamanism. They say
Mhm.
that there's pieces of us that leave throughout traumatic events in our life, and then parts of us that I guess that we reject, throughout different parts of our lives, or parts of us that we reject right now, like areas in our body. And it's kind of an interesting concept. But yeah, I love that. Like the fact that we're not compartmentalized, and we're all the different parts of us are here, and we're okay with it, and we accept it.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's
Mhm.
awesome. I love it. I love these conversations.
I know. I'm like, well, I could go on a whole other tangent around soul retrieval. I'd love to hear
I know,
everything you
it's
have to
just
say.
amazing, but everybody can relate to it on some form or another. Like we can all relate to times where we sort of left a part of us behind. Like, it was interesting. I was having a conversation with somebody about the fact that most of adults don't dance. I'm an artist, so I always talk about most adults. At what point did we stop drawing? Like, you never find a kid that says, I don't draw. It's not my thing. You'll never
Mhm.
find a child like would ever say that. They'll always color or creatively express themselves. And at what point do we leave that part of us behind? It's kind of an interesting thing.
Mhm.
And so
Wow.
you had mentioned one of the ways that you came back to yourself was through dance.
Mhm. Yeah. I I practice, I continue to practice. It's actually one of the foundational practices to continue on this journey, even though I'm not feeling I'm in crisis anymore. I still want to cultivate the deep relationship that led me
Hmm.
here.
Yeah.
Uh, so I practice a type of dance here in Vancouver, Canada, called Kundalini Dance.
Mm.
And so it's a chakra based dance where we really dance into specific vibrations within each chakra and alchemize the energy up, and so that we can really move through the things that tend to hide energetically in the body. I'm actually heading to Bali in April to
Oh,
start the foundational
I want to
training
go there so bad.
with me.
I would love it. I would love it. That's so cool. So is that related to Kundalini yoga?
So I was actually thinking about this the other day because somebody else asked me. I don't know the answer to that. I do know that Kundalini Dance was only founded about 20 years ago,
Hmm.
by Leola and Tara. Obviously, Kundalini Yoga has been around for much, much longer. So I'm wondering if maybe like the foundational principles of the work are woven into the dance, but I'm not exactly sure how to
That's
compare it.
interesting. I'll look into it.
Yeah.
I'll look
So
also into if they teach that around here. That would be so cool to do. It sounds like a really interesting thing. I mean, obviously, we don't. I feel like we sit so much. Like most people sit at their desk all day. Think about how that affects our chakras and our sacral chakra, our lower back, which in Chinese medicine is really the center of reproductive health,
mm,
interestingly enough. And a lot of people have lower back issues from sitting too
mhm.
long because your back isn't supported a lot of times. I mean, and it's real, we're not meant to sit. We really aren't.
No, we're meant to dance.
That's right. That's right. I love that. We're meant to dance. That's a book right there.
Here we go. Copyright.
That's right. That's right. So, how can the fertility awareness method help women get pregnant?
Oh my gosh. So I'll start this with a story actually. There are, no, you know what? I'm not going to share that story right now. The reason why I'm so passionate about the fertility awareness method is because I feel like, especially when women are heading into their fertility, there is kind of this misconception that we can get pregnant anytime. So for
Mm-hmm.
many, many women, when they are coming off of birth control, or they're deciding to go on their fertility path, they're under the assumption that they're going to get pregnant right away, unless they've been kind of cautioned by friends who are experiencing some sort of infertility or struggles. So the reason why I really love the fertility awareness method is because it is an opportunity to deepen the understanding of the cycle, deepen the relationship with the cycle, and to actually really participate in their health. So for me personally, I love to chart on paper. I think apps are really great, but they are missing, really important marks around cervical placement and cervical fluid. For me personally, basal body temperature just isn't enough to really understand the cycle deep enough to understand your fertility peaks. So for me, it's like this opportunity to get to know the body and to be able to be really informed, so that you can advocate for yourself when you're in those appointments with your care practitioners.
Mm-hmm.
Is being able to build a relationship with them too is so important, right? You need a team around you, especially if you're
True.
going through any sort of struggle. And you know this as a
Mm-hmm.
practitioner as well. You really need to feel a bit of purpose in that journey. And especially if you can bring in some of your charting paper and say, hey, like, maybe I don't really understand these like peaks and valleys, but this is the information that I have coming from my body. And I'm seeing that I ovulate on a different day every month or a different week. How can we remedy this together? And
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, boom, the heart feels and the feminine feels like we are part of the journey, instead of feeling a bit chaotic, just bouncing around and not feeling the participation of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I love it for that reason. I also love it because it is quite effective for most people, unless there are barriers that are preventing them from conception. So those two right there are like gold for me.
Yes, definitely. And it's another form of mindfulness to
Yes.
be able to really understand your body and listen to your body. And it's interesting what happens when you listen to anything. When you listen, I find it with meditation. When I go in deep into meditation and I listen to my body responds. It's
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Our attention, I think just our mere attention, when it comes from a neutral place and we're just watching, it kind of aligns with our consciousness. And I feel like that's like sunlight. I feel like it helps things grow and heal. Just our mere attention. It's interesting how, kind of circling back, how you said the healing or the journey found you,
Mm-hmm.
or it came to you. And I feel like when you're just watching, when you're kind of like in this like watcher observer mode, you allow your body to speak to you. And that's what I love about all of that. I love about just paying attention to your body and becoming aware. Really, that's like the source, is just awareness. Love it. And another thing that I found that was interesting when I was reading about you is the topic of miscarriage.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of women go through this and obviously feel awfully alone. And and you do offer support for women experiencing this type of loss. You really do hold a space for that, which I think is so important. And that, I mean, I have met many people who are on the fertility practitioners who work really with everything, but I love the fact that you created like a space for that with
Mm-hmm.
what you offer women.
Yeah. So thank you, for bringing that up, because anytime that I can bring awareness to miscarriage and how I feel so passionately about the way that we could really up level the way that we are supporting women in that space, I really, I can't emphasize enough that regardless of how a pregnancy ends, so whether it's ending because the body is signaling a decision of the mind, or having a baby and bringing that baby home or not,
Mm-hmm.
we need support. right? The
Yeah.
body is going through a huge shift,
Mm-hmm.
and hormonally, emotionally, for sure. And miscarriage is a huge part of that, and it's really common. So the fact that we've created a society that really likes to tuck away the
Mm-hmm.
miscarriage experience and keep it really private, I think is perpetuated by us telling people not to tell others that they're pregnant until they're 12 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
because it really advocates for people being more secretive and more closed off, because if this happens, you wouldn't want to tell anybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I always offer to people when they get pregnant, and I say, you don't have to scream it from the rooftops, but
Mm-hmm.
tell the people that you would want to support you if anything changed.
That's a good point. That is a good point. Because like on the one hand, I do understand that you don't want to tell people that are just random people and then have to talk to them about, your innermost, deepest, loss. However, I do agree that it forces you to lean on those that you can trust. And I think it's important to be in a position that you have that support, because ultimately I think we need that support. That's really what you need. It's good for you.
And I mean, my community knows me well. I have a really good relationship with the midwives in the city. And one of the things that I always say is hire me early.
Mhm.
As a doula, like I practiced as a birth doula as well, hire me early. Because if anything changes, you're just going to have somebody that you have hired to support you. You get your money back immediately. And I just show up and I nourish you from the exact place that I would if you were in a postpartum period with birth, because it's the same.
Mhm.
And it's not, because it can be really emotionally draining.
Mhm.
And the pain point for me is really finding the space to bring women together to
Mhm.
have these conversations. That's something that I'm finding particularly challenging. I would really love to be able to have like more group opportunities so that we
Mhm.
can start creating community around miscarriage and loss. However,
Mhm.
I do feel like there is still that bit of tabooness, a little bit of like toes dipped in the water. And so when I am supporting women, I support them one-on-one. But I will tell you, I have a free resource that I send to anybody that contacts me, because I get a lot of messages saying my sister's just lost her baby, or my
Mm.
friend's just lost her baby. What can I do? And I have a 3-page resource sheet that I send of things to say, things to
Oh,
buy
that's
to really
great.
nourish the body, and how to show up for your community. And I feel like that's actually going to be the ripple effect that we need.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. And all of the information I'll put on the episode notes so everybody
Awesome.
can access. So cool. So what is the one message, which you've obviously such amazing messages so far, but what is the one message you would like to share with women that are currently going through a fertility challenge?
That's such a good one. And I'm thinking of so many right now. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking of what I would have wanted to hear at the
Mhm.
beginning of my journey that wasn't available. Um, this one's coming through really strongly, so we'll go there. I really want to invite anyone that's going through a fertility challenge to take one day and just slow down, because we can be so quick to want to fix. Um, and it can be such a painful experience for so many reasons. And if we can just take the opportunity to slow down for one day and take some time for ourselves and really truly connect to our hearts, and really connect to how we want to feel on the journey. Because when you're going to many appointments and many of them are coming out with you feeling like you're broken or that something's wrong with you, it can be really easy to be in a struggle space and not be able to climb out. And so if you can just slow down and take the time to find a way to support yourself and really connect to how you're going to feel, like maybe setting yourself up with, okay, after every fertility appointment, I or my partner and I are going to do this one thing that really connects the two of us and makes us feel really, really great and really connected to our bodies or our hearts, so that you can infuse the experience with light and joy.
Mhm.
Because light and joy are missing, it is going to feel dreadfully dark. And
Yeah.
coming from someone who's been through the experience as well, there is truly nothing more healing than being able to find space to laugh and do fun things with your partner while you're on a path that feels like it won't end.
That's such an important point. And I actually just recently had a conversation in a recent podcast about that, about how we put joy on hold as if we're saving money.
Yes.
And it's something that we have access to at all times, but we don't feel like we deserve it until we get the goal. And whatever that goal is, it's like we can't allow ourselves to feel joy until.
Mm-hmm. And where does it end, right? You know, and we see this so much playing out in our lives outside of the fertility journey. Like, I'll be better when I have this much money in the bank, and then I'll have a better life when I get that house. I'll have a better life when I meet a man, and then I'll have a better life when I have a baby.
That's right.
So
It
like,
doesn't end. It's a habit. It's just a way of perceiving life. And we think that we give it a reason or a justification, but it doesn't end. You know, it's not the justification. We have to look into it, look deeper into why. Yeah.
and cultivating joy, especially with whoever you're sharing your fertility journey with.
That's so true. It's amazingly true. Yeah.
It's so important for you to be able to sink into joy when things do go right. Right?
That's right.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is. And it is really, that's like what houses everything. You know, it's so important to really have that connection and that love with your partner. And a lot of times I've seen that gets put on the back burner. But yet it's really the foundation of everything. And it also creates a much better hormone balance. I'll tell you, it's good to be active and to really have passion. It's healthy for you.
100%. And yeah, it's just like you said, I love the way that you said it's like it's the house, it's the foundation. Yeah, that's beautiful.
So cool. So this is such a great conversation. I always love like spiritually inspired conversations. I feel like it always elevates the energy. It always elevates like the vibration. And I love this topic. I could talk for hours about it. So thank you so much for coming on. And for people who I'm sure want to look into and find out more about you, where can people find you?
Yeah, so I am most active on Instagram on Humble Wild Wellness. I give away lots of freebies on my account. I love to spoil my community, so definitely sign up for my newsletter. I do not spam you. I send really wonderful things. And I am in the current up-leveling of a rebrand right now, so you can find me mostly on Instagram. There's a couple links in my bio, but you will see my fresh new page coming soon to my website, so stay tuned for that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on. This was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. Talk soon.
So that concludes today's episode. You can find all the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to leave a review. Reviews are everything to podcasters. You can find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com. And please be on the lookout for my online course and program. This course has emerged from everything that I've been using for the fertility program I now offer at my office. I wanted to consolidate all of my suggestions and coaching and put it into a form that anyone can purchase and use. It was important for me to encompass key fertility health factors as well as guide you in implementing changes in your routine that are shown to boost fertility while being realistic and user-friendly. I will be offering this course with and without coaching. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com, where you can find the subscription form. I thank you so much for listening in and hope you have a beautiful day.